Hello everybody. Today's topic will be analyzing a short YouTube clip called A Message to Young Conservatives, where we will see this young gentleman and what he has to say. Let's go.
If you're a young conservative, I need you to stop what you're doing right now and listen to me.
An interesting, important, very good hook, grabbing attention.
Don't brush me off, don't get triggered and ignore me, because 20 years ago, I was you. I was convinced the United States was being taken over by radicals, leftists, communists, and I couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Establishing a connection with the audience, not a bad technique, although he extrapolated a little bit and threw some things that can sound, whether on purpose or not, that sound as exaggerations. But let's see what happens.
Years of my life advocating for privatization to get the government out of the way of the free market, promoting the rugged individualism that professed I'm more successful because I worked hard and I made better choices.
Interestingly, here he grouped three things. The first two, kind of many so-called conservatives may agree, and then he tacked the third one to imply as if it is a member of the group, guilt by association, where that rugged individualism and I'm better than you, this is probably not as commonly shared among people whom we can call conservative. But keep in mind, it is a common technique. Sometimes you have several characteristics that you can attach to a group, and you pick the least favorable one and expand on it so that to make people not like the group as a whole.
I realize now, and what I hope you realize long before I did, is the fight you think you're fighting is manufactured. It isn't real. You've been fed lies about our nation's history, our fiscal and monetary system, our education system, and our economic system.
So, four broad claims presented as if they are facts. Let's see if he will offer the support. If not, we have a misrepresentation of the kind of giving you an opinion as if it is fact.
That's the reason why people on the left don't make any sense to you. It's because you aren't arguing with the same foundation of facts.
Invalidation of the other side. If the other side doesn't, if the people whom you disagree with don't make sense on you, to you there is only one reason, as opposed to maybe others.
You have been indoctrinated to believe America is something that it isn't. America is not ordained by God, it's not infallible, and it's not the country that every other country emulates.
So here, let's talk a little bit. Ordained by God. Yes, this is a phrase that often politicians pay lip service to, and just let's be clear, even though we can see mostly Republican candidates do that, sometimes depending on the district and depending on what their consultants would say, Democrat candidates use that phrase too. Here we have that unusual case where people pay lip service to something and it is just like saying good morning and they move on to the issue. That does not necessarily mean that everyone who is conservative has to be a devout Christian or devout with any religion.
And no one's trying to destroy the United States either.
This is kind of interesting because as of 2022, we already have seen public statements made by people who are clearly identified as being on the left, saying that they want to tear the system down. So that shaming language may not even be as accurate as he wants to present it.
Global economic ramifications alone make it an imperative that the United States is successful. Even on the world stage, countries like China and Iran need the United States economy. No one is trying to turn you into a subject of the United States government or the United Nations for that matter either.
Interestingly, this is like a special version of the straw man argument. What is a straw man argument? You do not address the actual argument of the other side. Instead, you create a distorted version of the other side argument, and then you can refute that because you can't refute the main argument. Here, how many conservatives actually are saying that China wants to literally destroy the United States or that the United Nations needs to do a protectorate of the United States? I haven't heard that mentioned much from the upper echelons of the Republican Party. And if we are going to talk about conservatives versus liberals, it is very important to pay attention to what the mainline politicians are saying, or the people who are recognized in the field as representatives of their group are saying. And we don't want to allow the manipulation of the kind where you pick some random user on Reddit who has very little influence or following and say that this is what all conservatives or this is what all liberals are about.
That is complete BS. The United States government, it's comprised of people just like us, from mail carriers to FBI agents, military, police.
He's right here. The government is comprised by people like us. And just like people, because they're fallible. Sometimes institutions can get compromised, in which case intervention and work are necessary.
Firefighters, teachers, a majority of our elected officials, all the way to the top levels of administrations like the VA, Social Security Administration, and the Department of Education. All normal, everyday folks like me and you. Yes, some of them are more corrupt than others, but they're human. But they're literally...
Even if the individuals are not corrupt, they can be doing everything in good faith. If you ask them to enforce harmful policies, the end result will still be harm. He's not addressing this point, however.
They're us. And I don't know about you, but in my experience as a civilian executive, as a military officer, as an individual who worked directly with cabinet secretaries and their staffs, and now as a small business owner, 99% of folks are less interested in trying to control the world.
Please notice the list of qualifications. This is the referral to credentials. I have this long list of credentials, therefore what I'm telling you is correct. Please pay attention whether or not these credentials have any influence on the position taken.
Than they are trying to keep their kids out of jail and away from heroin and meth. American conservatism is grounded in fear. And while you may fit one...
We can call it psychological blackmail, where conservatism is based in fear, assumption that he presents as a fact, and fear, as we know, is irrational. Therefore, if you're a conservative, you're conservatives because you're irrational. Don't be irrational, thus don't be a conservative. Shame and insult to get you to change your mind.
All of these, they are the defining hallmarks of American conservatism. The fear that the Social Security that you've paid into isn't going to be there when you get old.
It is 2022. It is interesting. This is when the presentation was made, June 18th, 2022. It is interesting how usually, I remember the last few election cycles, when come election, it is usually the liberal politicians who say vote for us, or the Republicans will do away with Social Security. Now here, I don't know if the gentleman here is actually versed in American politics. He should be aware of that line of reasoning, and kind of maybe he's speaking about the wrong party. If he talks about fear regarding Social Security, that's he should be blaming the left.
The fear that the country that you've been told your entire life is the greatest country in the world actually has things that it needs to change or adapt so that we can grow and meet this century's challenges. The fear there's some global conspiracy trying to subjugate the American people, or the education system is somehow indoctrinating your children to become...
Now here, I don't know, is he trolling or is he saying that really with straight face? Just 2 months before this presentation got recorded, there were several videos released by Project Veritas where teachers and school administrators in the United States got caught on camera and exposed for pushing a radical left-leaning agenda. And that sparked outrage, and we had state governors, also candidates for state and local and federal office, who promised to take action. So accusing the listener that they're fearful of something that doesn't exist, well, that something just got in the news, seems to be a little interesting.
Become radical socialist, and for some, it's the fear, conscious or subconscious, that the culture you're used to, the heterosexual Anglo-Saxon Christian culture, is being pushed to the side in favor of multiculturalism. And for some others, yes, it's a fear of the coming white minority in the United States. That fear inside you when you look at your bank or your retirement account, or you think about your kids growing up in America that doesn't look like the one you grew up in, that has nothing to do with Democrats, minorities.
Never trust a politician who raise bites and talks negatively against his own race. If he does that against his own race, how much more so he will turn against your race if that becomes politically expedient.
Minorities, immigrants, the LGBTQ plus community, or any other sociological factor. You've been told your entire life that everyone is an individual and that you alone are responsible for your success in life, and that taking handouts from the government makes you a bad person, or worse yet, it makes you weak or incapable, or that pride you feel because you have a better health insurance plan than someone else. Those ideas.
So here please notice two elements. A long list of opinions and accusations presented as fact. And number two, rapid changing from topic to topic. I already stated this in several videos. This is a technique that more people should be aware of. When the speaker goes rapidly over several topics that each of them may require pausing to debunk, you are not allowed the opportunity to have that pause to debunk because he is already on the next item, on the next accusation, the next punch. So as you, as the listener, you're trying to catch up with what's going on, your brain is trying to fill in the blanks, and thus you try to figure out, is there a scenario that he may make sense? And you end up using your brain to lie to yourself in order to make sense of what he's saying, and by the time you catch there, he's already on the next topic. So when you have live conversation, do not allow people to run away like that and jump from topic to topic. If they accuse you on one thing and you think it is worthwhile debating, you stick to that point until they either surrender or prove themselves right on that particular point, not switching to, but what about this, what about that?
They're just wrong. The narrative you've been fed your whole life is just that. It's a narrative, and it isn't true. Despite what charlatans like Glenn Beck and Hannity and Shapiro and Levin have told you for...
Another manipulation, this time a guilt by association. You do not need any of these individuals to form your mind, and he can still tell you that, oh, you have been lied to, you're not thinking for yourself.
For years, if not decades, you aren't in competition with your neighbor for scarce resources. If we're going to continue to thrive as a country, hell, as a species, we need to start working together and throw out this whole rugged individualism that might have been a badge of honor in 1815, but today it just looks so...
Again, he's speaking one point that he identifies conservatism with, and he tries to send you that urgent message that please don't cling to that point, therefore vote for us.
Selfish and unnecessary. And I'm not saying anything other than we need to work together, so don't strawman my words here. But
So pay attention. Shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be right. Here, it's got shameful and unnecessary.
Seriously, think about it. Think about what this narrative has you believing. You'll eventually start to see how the titans of the early 20th century have us trained as laborers. Like why our school system is so bent on perfect attendance. Because that translates to a good worker.
And what's wrong with that? And also, having good work ethic translates not only to just being a good worker, but being reliable when it comes to dealing with other people, whether it is work-related or not. Now, it is very interesting how we attach entire major phenomena such as the public education or something else and stick it to some one narrow reason. This is often very wrong and highly misleading.
Why are we taught to never quit something that we don't like? Because as adults, we're conditioned to accept the fact that we're unhappy and get up and go to work anyway. Why do we want to keep the minimum wage low? Because it makes us feel good to say we earn $20 or $30 or more an hour.
Here, we need to make a pause because we often see that minimum wage laws brought in, and until we make the argument clear and educate people, we need to keep pounding on this point. Here are the problems with minimum wage laws. It is not that so-called conservatives complain that somebody is going to make $5 more an hour without they're deserving it. This is a very petty refutation that really shouldn't be made. The issue with minimum wage laws is that once you set the price of labor at a certain level, you eliminate from the labor market anyone whose productivity is below that level, because it will make no sense to hire them. And if you go further and legislate, let's say on state level, that people whose productivity is only $10 per hour but should be paid 25, and if you legislate that businesses should just absorb the cost, then you end up with more businesses no longer being profitable, thus no longer having a reason to exist, therefore closing, and all those people who were hired even before now are no longer hired. Or further, you make profitability of business so small that the owners and managers just would say, screw it, why have all that risk and all that headache, let's just close operations and go get a job. Normally, I don't like to give real life examples of when discussing policies, because that deviates from the hard, robust analysis, and people can always use examples to kind of obfuscate the situation. But I think here it is worth to give one illustration, because I heard about a family who went through that, and it had a very good indication of what minimum wage laws actually result in. So there was a couple in California, two hardworking professionals, let's say medicine, engineering, or college professors, that kind of thing. And at some point, they decided maybe they could try, because both of them worked very long hours, they could experiment with hiring live-in help. So somebody, preferably they wanted a woman to live in one of the rooms in their house. But they wanted to do everything legally. So they look at the law, they saw what California had back then about minimum wage, about social security taxes, but that's a federal thing, but still had to go under. You had to do everything properly. There was medical insurance, there was paid time, and who knows what else, and they wanted to do it legally. So they ran the calculation and saw that that was way beyond what they could afford or what they believed the service was worth it. So what did they do? They never got live-in help. But the thing here is that somebody probably would have been willing to take the job based on what they initially thought it was fair for them to pay before they learned about all those additional governmental requirements. And so the government made a decision on behalf of somebody who could have taken the job, and the government said, no, we do not want you to get that job. We care about you. We care about poor people. Therefore, we would rather have you unemployed than working in this household, because they are oppressing you. And this is the problem with minimum wage laws or other so-called feel-good laws, usually passed by people who do not think past level 1 when it comes to analysis and consequences of decisions and interaction between systems. We can have separate discussion on economic consequences of policies, and that would be quite fun. But this here was just about the minimum wage. Let's keep going.
Ignoring that your CEO makes 350 times that. But
another favorite job. The issue here is usually when you're in the free market and others try to pay you as little as possible and try to get from you as much as possible, and a deal occurs when both parties agree. Here, they look at high performers and say, and focus on how much they make, but they never focus on how much they contribute. Why are these people making that much? Who is giving them that money, and where that money comes from? That assuming no major governmental intervention, because then, of course, all sorts of shenanigans may be going. So how come we never focus on productivity and where your wealth came from? We always focus on why is he making so much? It is not fair, which is a very insidious play on our psyche, which even 5-year-old kids could understand. Why should Jimmy get 2 pieces of candy when I get 1? Not realizing that here we are not talking about candy. We are talking about something others giving to you because they appreciate even greater what you have given to them.
At least you don't make minimum wage, right? You know, I used to rail against minimum wage, saying it meant minimum skill and people should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and learn to make themselves more.
The bootstraps argument is very common as a criticism against people who support market economy because it relies again on the intellectual sleight of hand. In physics, you cannot pull yourself with the bootstraps because forces are balanced and you just can't. However, the economy is not a zero-sum game. In market economy, assuming no major governmental intervention, you give to other people what they need, and if they appreciate it, they give something back to you in order to get from you what they need. So in economy, you can pull yourself with the bootstraps because you become useful to others and then in turn get useful to you. So actually, if you want to apply physics comparison, instead of say pulling yourself with the bootstrap, it will be more like a pulling yourself up a ladder where every rung is how you progress by being more and more valuable to others and then in turn get valuable to you. So don't fall for that trap.
Learn to make themselves more marketable to employers. Employers don't want minimum wage to rise because that cuts into their golden parachute.
So another intellectual sleight of hand. Employers care how much the market will appreciate what they bring to that market. If your productivity increases tenfold, they will gladly pay you fivefold. They do not want you to be at a minimum wage. They want to make a profit. And there are multiple ways to make profit. And how you make profit in market economy? By being useful to others, something which conveniently is absent from all conversations that try to dump on conservatives.
If minimum wage had kept up with worker productivity, minimum wage would be $27 an hour right now. Today in 2022, $27 an hour is a great job by all standards. But if you make $27 an hour today and we had kept up, you'd be making closer to $100.
Please note here another trick. We were talking about minimum wage laws. Now we are talking why the wages, I assume he talks about the United States, why the wages in the United States are at this level, which is extremely complex discussion. And I would gladly debate this gentleman on this topic, but it has nothing to do with minimum wage laws. Now we're picking two separate subject areas that even though both contain the word wage, one is based on what politicians in a legislative body decide whether there should be a minimum wage and how much, and the other is the net result of decades of federal and state policy of numerous things plus the desires of voters and what they have voted for.
Your fight isn't about guns. It isn't about protecting the United States from communism or socialism. It isn't about preventing the LGBTQ community from sexualizing your children. And it isn't about an invasion of immigrants from our southern border. It's
4 points. Each of them could bring a complex discussion here, glossing over, presenting his particular version as a fact and moving on.
About power. And you aren't the one pulling the strings of power. Primarily.
He's saying that there are people who want power? Are there political parties that do not want power? Tell me one and I will consider voting for them.
Because you're too busy trying to get your kid to ball practice. You're cannon fodder for the folks who buy politicians.
Shame and insult.
And corrupt our system for their own personal gain. If you started a business and you were successful and you took care of your people who worked for you and you crushed it, you're amazing and I absolutely admire you. If you started a business, crushed your competition, squeezed out every competitor, and now account for almost 50% of the market and claim a net worth greater than the GDP of several countries on Earth, you're definitely on my list of horrible human beings.
And here, that was a very profound and very dangerous statement. I will refrain from this conversation of judging of the moral character of the presenter, so I'll try to focus strictly on the argument. So he's saying, if you come with a novel approach that you bring massive value to so many people that they overwhelmingly choose your approach as opposed to that of prior providers, somehow you are a horrible person. Let me give you one example of a horrible person. If you Google Standard Oil, about 130 years ago, they managed through innovation and business practices to lower the cost of kerosene threefold. At that time, electricity was a luxury. It wasn't in every house and people relied on lamps, oil lamps. So that evil man, Rockefeller, managed to bring light after dark to millions and millions of homes of Americans and enabled people, children and adults, to read at night and do other things in a way that no governmental program was able to do prior to that. Yes, you can say after that Standard Oil became a monopoly, so they had to be broken up, but the fact that just small group of people, let's say one man, or it wasn't one man, it was a lot of people who worked for him, managed to bring such a massive benefit to millions and millions of people. And here to have the audacity to say that you are a horrible person by bringing light and enabling people to use parts of the day that before they just had to sit idle in the dark or do who knows what. This goes beyond the pale. And you guys must be aware, and when you catch your opponents bringing these points, you can demolish them left and right. First, point of that actual value, the total impact, and not focus on some tiny part of the picture like crushing your competitors. What does that mean? Maybe the people who work in those firms who crush now work in your firm, so that's kind of very convenient to say crushed. What exactly do you mean? And what about the benefit that you confer to the society? Keep in mind, you did not crush the competitors. The society decided that your services or goods were much better than those of the competitors, and therefore other people chose you.
60 years ago, the average CEO made 20 times what the lowest paid full-time worker made in the company. Today, it's 350 times. And before you...
One convenient lie that people often don't say, they don't talk anything about how big a company is. Let's say there are two companies and the CEO is, let's pay $100,000. Then the two companies merge and now the CEO makes twice that because he's running twice as big company. And you say, oh my God, over just 1 year the CEO pay went up 100% while the workers' wages stagnate. Well, technically the total enterprise pays as much per capita, pays as much for CEO management, because now instead of two CEOs, 100,000 each, they have only one for 200,000 who is managing the whole operation. But let's not allow logic get in the way of these beautiful arguments we see here.
What do you think I'm demonizing the wealthy? I'm not.
You just did.
Demonizing the folks who created this system in the United States. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the J.
Pay attention, the Rockefellers, the guy who brought light after dark into millions of American homes.
P. Morgans and the corrupt politicians who are all too eager to get theirs, knowing full well the rest of America is suffering under an unsustainable economic system. You've been lied to. You've been lied to.
Yes, he's right. We have been lied to. We have been lied to in this presentation that we're just seeing now. It is important for people to get educated on the basic principles of economics, because when indoctrination substitutes education, and when people who have no idea that if you want to solve the problems of the world or alleviate the poor, you need to produce more goods and services, and you need to allow innovation that comes through the stimuli of the free market. And to talk about redistribution or how people who come with ideas that massively improve the life of millions are somehow horrible, that needs to be called out at any opportunity.
To your entire life, just like I was. Do Americans need to be productive? Yes, absolutely. We need to ensure our society has what it needs, and there is absolutely no possible way to ensure every American what it needs, and there is absolutely no possible way to ensure every American can live stress-free and in the lap of luxury. Are there going to be people who benefit more than others? Yes, absolutely. That's just the way it works. But should we have folks going bankrupt because their kid needs a bone marrow transplant? No.
Appeal to emotion. Keep in mind now when they start bringing way out of line, unusual and rare cases, and you can say, oh, there are so many. In a 350 million country, a lot of rare cases may appear too many if you pick and choose them. But be careful when they try to bring extreme samples and try to give you the idea that this is the whole picture. Whether or no you agree about various healthcare policies, or whether you agree that there should be one threshold or another of how much the government should assist people, the trick and the lies remain the same. Do not allow extreme examples to confuse the vision of what the actual situation is.
Should folks be sleeping under an overpass because they made a series of bad life decisions that only lend themselves to more bad life decisions? No, absolutely not. Should a single mom working 2 jobs or 3 jobs like mine did in order to make sure her kids at least had ketchup sandwiches when they got home from school? No. Now let me flip that around. Should an oil company's sole purpose be to generate a profit for shareholders?
Absolutely. A business sole purpose will be to be useful to others, which is motivated by generating profit. You're not going to generate profit if you're not useful to others unless the government is your only client. But again, this is a separate topic. You're useful to others. Others determine how much to give back to you.
Shareholders at the expense of every other American? No, absolutely not. Should a CEO...
Just to point one more time, the economy is not a zero-sum game, and everyone who brings that deserves to be countered immediately.
Who invented a new product or technology benefit from such a breakthrough? 100%, absolutely. But should that benefit be accumulating more wealth than can be consumed in 10 lifetimes? It's ludicrous.
Please notice, it doesn't matter how much you contribute. What matters is how much you take, according to their logic. So it will be much better, according to their logic, instead of the society and the people whom you have benefited from your contribution determine how much that contribution is worth. Rather, we should have politicians who want to ingratiate themselves to voters decide how much actually you, quote, deserve for your contribution. The problem with that is, even if we say, yes, I don't want anyone to be 10 times richer than what I am, so therefore I'll support that. The problem here is that when people know that they are not going to get paid what they hope that they will, they can choose much less stressful life path. And a lot of the inventions and improvements in your life that you see actually wouldn't be there. This is to think, if you think how difficult it is for a business to break through, especially just look it up, see how many of the startups just fail. Starting a business is almost like playing the lottery. Imagine if the lottery costs $1 to buy a ticket and the greatest payout is $15 because that's fair. How many people will be playing the lottery? Exactly the same thing. And now, how about when you determine that businesses should be capped of how much they earn? How many people are going to do these wild gambles with their own money, time, and effort in order to bring a remarkable product where the chance of success is probably less than 1%, but they still want to do it because in the rare case that they win, they're going to win so big, which could put them way ahead what they could have done by trivial means. And now, once we tell them, no, that's not fair, you're going to get paid tenfold, then why should I be paid tenfold if I only have 1% chance of getting there? So this is one of the problems that we should be bringing back to these people, and when we see that argument, this is one of the counters, and feel free to use it.
Should a company be allowed to funnel obscene amounts of profit to politicians in order to ensure their interests are placed above the interest of the rest of the country?
It is interesting. I do not want to bring in extraneous facts, rather rely on solid logic. But here it is October 2022, and if we look at the election situation in the United States, you can look which party almost all multi-billionaires and large corporations have circled their wagons around. And it is not the party he would identify as the conservative. So I respectfully request that the presenter backtracks this or explains how come all those rich people that he doesn't like actually support the party that he nudges us to shift towards.
You fluff out here with that nonsense. Now, I hate to burst your bubble, conservatives, but you're fighting against your own best interest and the best interest.
Shame and guilt.
of 320 million Americans in order to protect the accumulated wealth of a few million Americans who not only don't give two shits about you, they're going to be fine whether you prosper or not. Now let that sink in the next time you enter a voting booth and think you're saving America from the commies, because you're not. Matter of fact, all you're doing is allowing billionaires and corrupt politicians to piss on your head and try to convince you it's raining.
More shame and more insult.
I'm James Killen, deconstructing my conservatism for Midas Touch. Like, subscribe, and click.
Sorry, James, I don't think if you have ever been a conservative. I know the main premise of the channel that we just reviewed that video from, former conservative. It is normal for people to change opinion over time as they accumulate new information. That's actually what separates a thinking person from somebody who just religiously follows a dogma. But normally the way how things work, people have a core set of beliefs that remains almost constant through life. And based on that core set of beliefs, they adopt one political position or another. Sometimes over time, as they gain life experience or they accumulate more information, they may realize that those political beliefs actually, if these policies are to be implemented, they do not bring the results that they initially thought those policies would bring, and therefore sometimes people could have a change of heart. But here, based on the beliefs the presenter espoused out, that doesn't seem that could ever have matched with anything conservative, unless his view of what so-called conservatives were was really, really wrapped. And with that, see you on the next video.